Welcome to Core Concept HQ, where big ideas are simplified. Today's book summary is Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins.
We're not just summarizing a book today. I think that's the first thing to say.
No, not at all.
We are about to dive into one of the most raw, just unrelenting explorations of human potential and self-mastery through suffering that has ever been put to paper.
Right.
This isn't a book about, 5 easy tips to improve your morning. It's an absolute demand for radical responsibility.
And it's fueled by something so much deeper than just temporary enthusiasm, right? It's about building this truly armored mind.
Exactly.
If you are looking for a gentle, feel-good story that tells you everything is fine just the way you are, you really need to look elsewhere.
Yeah, this isn't it.
Goggins demands something different from us. He
Yeah.
forces us to look, squarely at the ugliest parts of our own histories, the failures, the trauma, the denials,
All of it.
and use that precise darkness as the raw, combustible material for total personal transformation. His entire life story is just empirical proof that denial is the ultimate and, I think, most comfortable enemy.
And that's what makes this whole narrative so compelling, is how Goggins, at first inadvertently and then later very intentionally, forged his entire existence into what he basically calls an evolutionary algorithm for success.
And the evolutionary algorithm, I like that.
Yeah, we're tracing the deep, really complex relationship between trauma and power. We're talking severe trauma, early childhood abuse, unrelenting poverty, constant racism, crushing depression. This stuff didn't just happen to him.
Right. He eventually made the choice to harness it.
He transformed the damage into the fuel for a profound, permanent metamorphosis. It's incredible.
So our mission in this deep dive is precisely to trace that specific journey. We want to understand how a person who described himself, in his lowest moment as the weakest piece of shit on the planet.
This is just a brutal thing to say about
Uh-huh.
yourself.
Absolutely. How that person transitioned into what he calls a warrior. And this required an absolute embrace of the path of most resistance, choosing the pain of discipline and responsibility over the quicksand of comfort and denial.
And to really understand the man he became, you have to go back. We must first understand the truly terrifying environment that forged his earliest instincts.
Okay, so let's unpack that starting point, because the foundation Goggins builds upon it's almost unbelievable. This was not merely a tough childhood.
No.
He described his earliest environment in Williamsville, New York, as finding hell on Paradise Road.
And that location itself is so key to understanding the deceit, the facade. Williamsville was an affluent, pristine Buffalo suburb.
Right, the kind of place with white picket fences.
Yeah, exactly. Full of model citizens, doctors, attorneys, successful executives.
Yeah.
But inside their home, it was just chaos. Absolute chaos.
Then his father, Toughness, was masterful at keeping up appearances.
Oh, completely. He was the local entrepreneur running the popular Skateland roller rink and the Vermilion Room bar above it. He played this unofficial sort of phony politician role in the community. Everyone knew him, everyone liked him.
But at home,
Goggins calls him simply the devil.
that dynamic is so crucial because the source material really lays out how Toughness maintained absolute control. Financial, emotional, everything.
Total control. He was the businessman, sure, but all the money was his. Goggins' mother had no independent bank account, no credit cards, absolute nothing of her own.
So the family's very survival, their next meal the next day, was contingent solely on his father's mood.
On his mood and on whether the cash drawer at the rink balanced correctly. It was that
Right.
precarious.
And this control meant that Goggins and his brother they were immediately stripped of a normal childhood.
Oh, completely. From age 6, they were working at Skateland. And this wasn't play. It wasn't helping out. It was involuntary servitude.
Goggins gives these incredibly specific, visceral details that communicate the constant state of fear he was in.
Yeah, the perpetual aerosol stink from spraying the skates, the permanently bloodshot eyes from exhaustion.
And most importantly, the need for permanent watchfulness. He said his father was always scanning the room like an all-seeing eye, and Goggins knew that any moment, any slight, could trigger a violent episode.
A loaded pistol.
The loaded pistol under the sofa cushion, that just says it all. The fear wasn't just a physical threat, it was psychological, immediate, and everywhere.
And the abuse of his mother was often public. It served as this kind of humiliation ritual. He talks about the night his mother discovered Toughness was cheating with one of his escorts.
On that very office sofa.
On the sofa.
Yeah.
The level of pathological control Toughness exerted, even, leveraging Buffalo bankers for credit to bring prostitutes across the border.
Mm-hmm.
It just created this utterly toxic, hypervigilant environment for a young child.
That hypervigilance, it erupted when Goggins was 6.
Yep.
He witnessed his father severely beat his mother, and in a moment of just pure visceral hatred overriding that instinctual fear, Goggins, a small child, physically attacked his own father to defend her.
And the result was his own severe, brutal beating, leaving him covered in welts. But the most profound part of that memory is his refusal to cry. He wouldn't give his father the satisfaction of breaking him completely.
Wow. And then comes the truly terrifying moment of systemic betrayal. His mother presses the panic button.
The police arrive. And Toughness, in his role as the unofficial mayor, meets them at the door, points to his expensive house.
And convinces them it was just necessary domestic discipline. He claimed his wife was spoiled and often threw things.
And that's the moment. That's when Goggins' world just crystallized into utter insecurity. The police left without so much as interviewing his visibly injured mother.
So this absence of justice established a terrifying, unspoken rule in his young mind.
It was open season, and we were the hunted. That's how he put it. This involuntary suffering, this constant, persistent state of terror is what created a permanent, elevated fight-or-flight mode.
Which is what psychologists and doctors now term toxic stress.
Exactly. Toxic stress.
We often talk about stress as, a temporary inconvenience, but you're suggesting this toxic stress fundamentally altered his development, right? How did that manifest physically later in life?
Well, it's a physiological fact.
Yeah.
Toxic stress, when you experience it chronically in early childhood, it spikes your cortisol and adrenaline frequently enough to set a new, abnormally high baseline for anxiety.
So your body is just always on high alert.
Always. And this state is proven to inhibit crucial developmental areas, particularly language acquisition and memory function. This is the physical origin of his later struggles.
Like the severe stutter.
The severe stutter that developed literally overnight in 3rd grade when he was threatened with being moved to a special school, the learning disabilities that forced him to repeat 2nd grade, and the strange physical symptoms.
The hair loss and the white splotches on his skin.
Yeah, inexplicable hair loss, white splotches. This wasn't just behavioral instability. His early life had literally wired his body for constant survival mode. It laid the initial and very unstable groundwork for a calloused mind, but one based purely on necessity, not strength.
It's just profoundly tragic. When they finally executed their escape to Brazil, Indiana, it seemed like they had a chance to heal.
And for a moment, it looked that way. The source material notes that the bedwetting, which was such a clear sign of deep anxiety, it stopped immediately upon leaving Toughness.
But as Goggins describes it, the demons were only dormant, not destroyed.
Not at all. The demons returned, but in a different form. Immense academic difficulty and maybe even more crushing, overt, pervasive racism.
Right, so having been denied a stable learning environment, Goggins just learned to cheat his way through school.
He gamed the system for 8 years, crystallizing his own ignorance. He was sitting in AP classes at Cathedral High School, maintaining this image while being a complete academic fraud internally.
And that anger and fear he'd suppressed from the abuse, now it found a new target, an external, terrifying target.
He details these specific, terrifying encounters in Brazil, which was a known hotbed of racism.
The redneck pulling a gun on him and his cousin after yelling the N-word.
And the public humiliation in a restaurant when a grown man demanded his partner never sit near that nigger again.
That public nature of it, that must have been devastating.
He said it hurt him far more deeply than the gun incident. It wasn't just a threat. It felt like a societal verdict. It raised that terrifying riddle. How many others in this town feel that way?
And it all culminated with the noose drawing.
Yeah, the discovery of a noose drawing and a misspelled death threat left in his school workbook. And when he confronted the principal, hoping for some compassion, some intervention.
The principal's only contribution was to point out the misspelling. They don't even know how to spell nigger.
Can you imagine? That anecdote just perfectly encapsulates the profound loneliness he must have felt. The realization that despite having white friends, despite being surrounded by people, he was carrying this isolating weight of being the only one in a hostile environment with zero systemic or adult help.
So his reaction, understandably, was one of self-destruction.
He deliberately adopted the low-budget thug identity, sagging his pants, blasting Snoop Dogg from a loud stereo, actively trying to piss people off and become the exact stereotype the racists loathed.
It was a misguided, desperate attempt to take control of the narrative. Say, you want me to be a thug? Fine, I'll be a thug.
But in reality, he was just confirming their worst prejudices and self-sabotaging his own future.
So all of this simmering denial and self-destruction, it leads to the inevitable brick wall moment of reality.
It had to. He lost his incentive. He was cut from varsity basketball because he'd skipped summer workouts out of anger. Then, the foundation of stability he'd finally found.
The carpenter, Wilmoth?
Wilmoth, exactly. The brief permission to breathe that Wilmoth offered him was blown the fuck up by Wilmoth's sudden death.
He recognized that the world was just going to keep piling up tragedy until it swallowed him entirely.
He was grieving, he was cheating, he was failing out of school, and he was working this dead-end job as a pest control worker. This is the quicksand he talks about, a state of numbness and comfortable, habitual, self-limiting choices that are slowly, comfortably killing you.
He needed a shock to the system, something powerful enough to penetrate decades of denial and self-imposed limitation.
He really did, and it was coming.
The intervention, when it finally arrived, was entirely self-imposed, and it was absolutely brutal. He gets the letter from school, a D average, too many absences, and goes home. A 297-pound pest control worker, mainlining sugar, cleaning cockroach-infested houses, and just feeling totally numb.
And he describes that moment so clearly, wiping the layer of grime and steam away from the corroded bathroom mirror and staring down the man staring back.
This wasn't framed as a moment of gentle introspection or self-care, was it?
Not at all. It was an act of pure, visceral disgust at his current reality.
And as he started shaving his face and head clean, he spontaneously gave himself this raw, honest lecture.
You're one dumb motherfucker. You read like a third grader. You're a fucking joke. I mean, the language is rough.
It's brutal.
But he realized that soft self-talk, the gentle motivational posters, they just weren't going to penetrate or rewire a brain that had been using denial for 20 years.
So the key realization here is the mechanism. Brutal, unvarnished self-critique to force lasting wholesale change.
He was stripping away every facade. The burly mustache, the physical size he used to hide his inner pussy, as he calls it, the comfortable numbness, and forcing himself to acknowledge the failure of his own self-governance.
This spontaneous venting session became a solo intervention with a crystal-clear, unforgettable conclusion.
Nobody is coming to save your ass.
And this powerful, self-directed ritual immediately gave birth to the accountability mirror. He didn't just stop at criticizing himself, did he?
No. He immediately weaponized that negativity. He started tagging specific, visible goals directly onto the glass with Post-it notes.
And they were small things.
Tiny things. Make your bed like you're in the military. Pull up your pants. Cut the grass.
This is the philosophy in action. This ritual isn't motivational fluff.
No, it's about choosing to be deliberately cruel to yourself every single morning to build genuine foundational discipline. The fear, the insecurity, the shame, the profound failure he was feeling, that internal desire for change.
He recognized that negativity as jet fuel.
As jet fuel, exactly. The accountability mirror ensured that every single day he faced the truth about the small, often mundane steps he needed to take to escape that negative feedback loop of cheating and scamming that had him trapped. This is how he started developing the thicker skin required to deal with reality.
And the path he chose immediately was the path of most resistance.
Of course.
He was 297 pounds, hadn't run in a year, but he instantly started waking before dawn, hitting the weights, and running often. He detailed one specific 13-mile run, the most he'd ever attempted, that just perfectly illustrates this philosophical shift.
That run is so central because it shows the fundamental decision to seek discomfort and intentionally confront historical trauma. On that route, he found himself approaching the precise intersection where that redneck had pulled a gun on him years earlier.
And his heart was leaping out of his chest, fear was consuming him, and every instinct was screaming, "Turn around!"
Every single instinct. Yet, he consciously forced himself to turn back and charge down that street anyway, directly into the source of his profound fear.
So that's the moment the mind started fighting back against the internal governor, overriding that survival instinct to flee.
Absolutely. He wasn't avoiding the trauma, he was seeking it out. He was confronting the literal geography of his deepest fear and charging straight through it. It was the decision to absorb the power of his own story, the past failures, the past hurts, and flip that emotional fuel switch.
This showed immediate dedication, radical self-discipline.
And the willingness to accept that transformation meant seeking discomfort, not avoiding it.
So the ultimate goal, the catalyst for the rest of his life, arrived when he caught a documentary on the Navy SEALs BUDS training, specifically the notorious Hell Week.
Right. And at this point, he's still the would-be warrior turned cockroach sniper,
Yeah.
numbing himself with food and TV, watching these men endure incredible suffering.
And he realized he was pooling in the dregs of life. He knew his only path forward was to seek the absolute hardest challenge available.
And the goal he set was, I mean, objectively absurd given his history. He was 297 pounds, has zero running ability, was an academic fraud with a third-grade reading level.
And he was trying to qualify for the SEALs before the program's eligibility period expired at the end of the year.
He had maybe 2, maybe 3 months to achieve the physically and mentally impossible.
The source material details the physical grinding required and the almost insane regimen he imposed on himself.
It was nuts. He couldn't run yet without destroying his knees, so it was hours on the stationary bike while simultaneously studying the ASWA books,
Right, multitasking pain and learning.
followed by hours in the pool, and then these high-rep circuit workouts, bench press, incline press, huge amounts of legs, aiming for 100 to 200 reps per set. He didn't just shed weight. He, multinized over 80 pounds in 2 months.
His dedication was total, bordering on obsession.
Yeah.
And it went beyond simple motivation, didn't it?
Oh, way beyond. He instituted this extreme accountability that was meant to crush any potential for doubt. He caught himself cutting a few corners during one workout, missed a single pull-up, and immediately drove back to the gym screaming at himself.
One missed pull-up cost me an extra $250.
And this is critical. He chose physical suffering now, that self-imposed punishment, over the mental anguish of doubt later. He was ensuring he wasn't leaving anything up to chance when the real test came.
And the mental hurdle, that academic fraud part, was just as intense as the physical one.
Absolutely. After years of cheating, he was racing the clock to get a high enough score on the ASYAB test, particularly that 50 in mechanical comprehension.
This is such a powerful illustration that transformation is not solely physical.
He was cramming vocabulary words and formulas every spare second, reading and rereading material that was genuinely difficult for him because of his past educational gaps. The anxiety was immense, and it was all centered on this one academic requirement that stood as the final barrier between his past self and the SEAL application.
And when he finally forced the test administrator to check his score, immediately risking disciplinary action, and saw that number, 50.
He just erupted, screaming yes in the testing center parking lot. It was this incredible moment that proved that total dedicated effort could overcome years of crystallized ignorance. He'd used the accountability mirror to focus and win a purely intellectual battle.
So he qualifies, he makes weight, he's stronger than ever. But then he hits BUDS training and immediately faces his deepest, oldest fear, water confidence.
Yeah, he was negatively buoyant. He described how panic just set in the moment he stopped swimming. He was terrified of drowning.
And the bobbing evolution is a prime example of turning that involuntary panic into intentional mental fortitude.
It is. Strapped with heavy tanks and weight belts, they had to sink to the bottom and then push up to gasp air. And the instructors, seeing his fear, were constantly in his face, yelling and thrashing him, actively trying to induce panic.
So his mind was screaming the old narrative, "You're an imposter, you can't do this."
All the old demons coming back. But he passed it, only to be pulled out on a medical exclusion for sickle cell trait. The doctors feared exercise-related cardiac arrest in the extreme conditions.
I imagine after enduring that fear of water, there must have been an enormous, complicated sense of relief.
Absolutely. He admitted he was ecstatic. It was an easy, medically justified way out. The physical danger was removed. He could stop. But then the medical board reversed the decision and told him he had to start over from day one.
And he folded.
He folded entirely. And that failure, allowing relief and fear to dictate his future, resulted in this overwhelming shame. He buried it by eating and powerlifting until he ballooned back up to nearly 300 pounds.
He wanted to be physically massive to hide the inner weakness.
To hide the 175-pound pussy inside, as he describes it. He realized, after that first failed attempt, that his mental foundation was still cracked. He wasn't just going back for a second attempt. He needed to dive back into the cauldron for a PhD in pain.
Which led to his legendary third Hell Week.
Exactly.
And it's during that third successful Hell Week, that crucible of physical and psychological warfare, that he developed this powerful, almost defiant concept of taking souls.
This is a critical and maybe the most misunderstood philosophical concept in the book.
How so?
Taking souls is not just about physical domination. It's primarily a mind game played on yourself, but directed externally. You gain a tactical advantage in competitive situations, a race, a negotiation, a difficult conversation, by achieving such excellence and control that you commandeer the thought process of the instructor or the opponent.
So he used conscious, almost theatrical defiance as a form of empowerment.
Yes. For instance, he details a run where he locked eyes on the miserable instructor, Psycho Pete, recognizing that while the students looked broken, the instructors looked composed and comfortable.
So Goggins realized he needed to steal their energy.
He had to. By humming the platoon theme song in the icy surf, by nipping at their heels on runs, and making a show of his defiance, smiling through the pain, he forced them to focus solely on him and lose their composure.
But the real power, you're saying, is internal preparation.
It has to be. He clarifies that if you know the quitting voice is coming, that simple, insidious question, why am I here? You must rehearse the answer ahead of time. You anticipate the self-pity, you preload your response.
So by ignoring the weakened mind and channeling that adrenaline through maximum unexpected effort, you can break your opponent down.
Not because you're physically stronger, but because you access a second or third wind that lasts far longer than they ever thought possible.
And that mental edge carried him through the most barbaric beatdown they received, even when his knee was completely broken and floating, demanding push-ups, flutter kicks, and bear crawls.
He was actively channeling his most recent victories.
The key connection.
That's it. He had calloused his fear of water, the deepest trauma from BUDS, and that experience, even in excruciating pain, gave him the strength to persevere. This ability to tap into the sympathetic nervous system on call, to choose fight over flight by drawing on past suffering, is the hallmark of the armored mind he was building. It's the constant choice to be better than you were 5 minutes ago.
So after achieving the title of SEAL, Goggins realized the transformation was a continuous process, not a destination.
Right. The work was just beginning.
And that's when the two cornerstone philosophies of his mindset emerged out of necessity, during moments of extreme physical distress and ultra-endurance racing. Let's start with the cookie jar.
The cookie jar. This was invented when he hit his absolute physical and emotional lowest point during that 101-mile run, an unplanned, spontaneous ultramarathon.
Right. We'll get more into that race later, but for now...
At the 70-mile mark, he was physically shattered, losing control of his bodily functions, lying in a lawn chair with, as he put it, no souls left to take. He had nothing left externally to fuel him.
So he had to draw energy from his past self. The mechanism is powerful because it requires us to reframe our history.
You're utilizing small sparks and past successes, the cookies, as kindling to fuel the current effort, no matter how miserable it is.
And these cookies aren't just abstract bragging rights, they are literal emotional fuel.
They have to be. He recalls that tiny victory of losing the first 5 pounds back when he was 297, or finally understanding every word in a single paragraph when he was struggling to read.
Or the immense effort of getting the exact score needed on the ASAB.
Exactly. You have to savor those small wins. You have to feel that victory again in your bones so that when the current wave of pain hits, you can pull out that specific hard-won memory and use its positive emotional charge to push through current misery.
As he puts it, you need small sparks to become the motherfucking inferno.
That's the idea.
This directly connects to his core realization about human limits, which is the 40% rule. If the cookie jar is the fuel,
Then the 40% rule is the ignition switch.
explain that analogy.
The analogy he uses is profoundly insightful. The human body is a high-performance vehicle with a governor, a software limit buried deep in the mind, intertwined with our sense of identity and self-preservation.
And that governor's only job is to send these exaggerated signals of pain, exhaustion, fear, insecurity.
Right, to protect us, to encourage us to stop long before we risk complete breakdown.
And the simple, devastating rule states that most people, in the face of discomfort, quit at 40% effort.
40%. We walk away from commitments, we hit the snooze button, we quit the diet, or we walk away from relationships because we feel empty or overwhelmed.
When in reality, we haven't even tapped half the treasure buried deep within us.
By knowing this rule is fundamentally true, that your mind is lying to you in the moment of pain, you gain the psychological space to stretch your pain tolerance and intentionally push past that perceived mental ceiling.
So the goal isn't to stay at 100% all the time.
No, that truly leads to injury. But it's to regularly access 60%, 80%, and beyond by ignoring the governor's bullshit. And this principle applies not just to physical feats, but critically to life, to work, to even intimate relationships where we're tempted to give up when things feel difficult or stagnant.
That raises a critical point, though. Goggins pushes physical limits to the point of bloody urine and stress fractures. How do we as listeners distinguish between pushing past 40% in life, say, finishing a grueling project or enduring a hard relationship conversation, and what looks like pathological self-destruction, which he sometimes verges on?
That's a great question, and that's where the concept of callousing the mind comes in. The distinction is in the intention and the reflection. Goggins acknowledges the risk, but his intention is always to gather data on his mental capacity.
So for us, the key is applying the 40% rule incrementally.
Exactly. If you're burned out at work, your governor is screaming 100%, but you're likely at 40%. Pushing to 50% might mean working one extra focused hour or taking on a project you feared. It's about finding the edge of comfort, not necessarily the edge of collapse.
So this whole process, the cookie jar, the 40% rule, the relentless self-critique, it's all about callousing the mind.
Right. He argues vehemently that the mind remains soft and exposed until it genuinely experiences hardship, abuse, failure, disappointment, or chosen pain. Enduring these experiences allows the mind to callous over.
But the critical nuance is how that callus forms.
Yes, because there are two paths.
One path, fueled by external blame, leads to rigidity and a victim mentality.
Exactly. If you see yourself purely as a victim of circumstance, the callus becomes this thick shield of defensiveness, resentment, fear, and cautiousness, protecting you from the unfamiliar. It makes you rigid and hard to reach, but not genuinely hard of mind.
But the other path.
Goggins argues that after his third Hell Week, he became someone new. He had fought through so many horrible situations, but remained open and ready for more pain. That calloused mind uses pain as immediate, necessary fuel and allows him to withstand these hailstorms of pain.
This is the definition of the armored, bulletproof mindset.
The foundation of true character, built not by avoiding weaknesses, but by accepting them and facing past demons head-on.
Okay, we have to talk about the 101-mile feat in San Diego because it provides the ultimate empirical evidence for the 40% rule in action. This was sheer hubris.
So completely. It was driven by what he calls the Viking mentality.
Yeah.
Zero training, heavy-duty squats and deadlifts the night before to intentionally start the race broken.
It was an immediate descent into destruction, designed to test the mental governor in the most volatile way possible.
And he finished the marathon mark, mile 27, at an elite pace, running across known territory. But beyond that, the body just shattered, comprehensively.
He detailed the horrific signs of total systemic failure.
Low blood pressure, bloody urine, a sign of kidney distress liquid diarrhea leaking down his leg.
And his feet were slivered with multiple stress fractures and cracked toenails. It's just gruesome.
And his support crew, Kate, was frantically trying to get him to quit and rush him to the ER. But Goggins refused, continuing to push through what the body defined as impossible.
And after finishing, he lay in the fetal position in the tub, shivering, caked in blood and waste, describing this excruciating, undeniable physical pain as his trophy ceremony.
That framing is so profoundly important. He wasn't simply enduring the pain. He was relishing it because it was absolute, undeniable confirmation that he had mastered his mind.
It proved the human body can withstand far more than conventional wisdom suggests.
This wasn't theoretical. This was a personal, self-inflicted autopsy of limits. If he could complete 101 miles with zero preparation, he proved the potential was purely a mental capacity, decoupled entirely from his genetics or his current conditioning.
And then, years later, he received the bombshell medical diagnosis that provided absolute, undeniable physical proof of that claim. A revelation that just voids every single potential excuse or argument about his natural athletic ability.
He was diagnosed with an atrial septal defect, an ASD, a hole in his heart, a severe congenital defect.
Which meant his oxygenated blood was mixing with non-oxygenated blood, and he was supplying only about half the necessary oxygen to his muscles and organs for optimal performance.
Potentially for his entire life.
Let's just pause on the weight of that for a second. He ran 3 Hell Weeks, multiple ultramarathons, and competed successfully in SEAL training, one of the most physically demanding military programs on Earth, with a broken heart.
Running on a tank perpetually half full. The doctor was reportedly truly amazed.
It forces a total recalibration of what human capacity means.
It does. His accomplishments were not due to being genetically gifted. They were a result of his mind compensating 100% for a 50% physical deficit.
His medical history even noted that if they had known, he never would have been allowed to jump out of planes or scuba dive, let alone become a SEAL.
It just voids every potential excuse about being genetically predisposed to success and reinforces that the accomplishments were purely a result of harnessing the mind's power. There's no other explanation.
So after the second successful heart surgery to repair the ASD, The obsession shifted again. He was still battling chronic physical pain and the knots, but he realized it wasn't just old injuries.
No, it was linked to years of that fundamental fight-or-flight tension from his abusive childhood.
A constant tightening of the psoas muscle, which compressed his spine and shaved 2 inches off his height.
And this is the ultimate final stage of his evolution, focusing on a deep-seated, painful weakness until it becomes a strength. He didn't focus on getting stronger in the conventional sense. He focused on becoming vulnerable and flexible.
The psoas muscle is often called the muscle of the soul, right?
It is. It's a deep muscle that controls posture and is the body's central tension keeper. Because of decades of toxic stress and his body constantly preparing to run or fight, that muscle was locked up like steel cable, physically holding on to his childhood trauma.
He describes trying to sit Indian style, and his knees were up around his ears. It must have been excruciatingly frustrating after years of brutal strength training.
It was the ultimate test of patience and sustained discipline. He dedicated obsessive hours, up to 12 hours a day, to intensive stretching to correct his balance and free his body from the physical manifestation of his past trauma.
This final shift is so philosophically profound. After decades of seeking out maximum hardness and invulnerability, he sought out the maximum flexibility and vulnerability.
Allowing his mind and body to finally move past the chronic damage inflicted by his earliest experiences.
Which leads us to his current, unyielding philosophy. Peaceful but never satisfied. The continuous race.
He demonstrates this by returning to wildland firefighting at age 43. He's faster and more flexible now than he was in his 20s due to the sustained discipline of the calloused mind.
His point is that you must always be willing to start at zero.
Always. His refrigerator is never full. There is always more to do, more knowledge to gain, and always a weakness, physical, mental, or skill-based, to strengthen.
So the core lesson across this entire relentless journey is extreme ownership. We are the sum total of the obstacles we've overcome.
And our biggest enemy isn't the challenge in front of us. It's the comfort we embrace when we feel we've finally done enough.
We must never confuse exhaustion with success.
The most profound insight Goggins offers isn't really about running, is it? It's about the internal conversation that we all have. Self-doubt, self-pity, and fear. They're natural reactions to any bold attempt to change your life.
And you can't stop them from blooming in your brain.
You can't.
But you can neutralize that internal critic along with the external criticism and jealousy by asking, what if? You channel that past suffering as direct fuel. You lean on the calloused mind you've built.
And you use those moments of hard-won victory in your cookie jar to push through the present misery.
Right.
And if you choose this path of continuous war with yourself, if you embrace radical honesty in the calloused mind, you will inevitably face jealousy and doubt from others, even those closest to you.
Your success, your light, reflects off the walls they've built around their own self-imposed limitations.
That's beautifully put, and you cannot let the comfort and fear of others dictate your potential. Embracing the uncomfortable is the daily, necessary discipline.
That armor, that bulletproof mindset, it doesn't come easy. It comes through choosing to be better, through hard work, and by understanding that failure isn't the end. It's simply a required stepping stone to future success. You must always be willing to start at zero.
Always.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget, at Core Concept HQ, we simplify powerful ideas to help you live smarter. See you in the next summary.